so much for joining us today. And if it's your first webinar with us, welcome. And if you're returning, we really appreciate it, and we hope you'll learn something today. My name is Lindsay Martin, and I'm the Vice President of Consulting here at RxTrail. And today we're going to be talking about one of the topics that tends to make people very nervous in the 340B world, HRSA audits and just overall compliance. And the good news is that audits don't have to be scary if you're just prepared. So whether you've already experienced one or hoping you never have to, we do hope you'll leave today feeling much more confident. And then joining me today is Bailey Hall. She is a consultant here at RxTrail and spends a tremendous amount of time helping our clients prepare for HRSA audits and just staying on top of all of the regulatory changes. Between the two of us, we've supported organizations through many HRSA audits over the years, and today we're just kind of excited to share all of what we've learned along the way, and we promise to keep it as practical as possible. And hopefully, this isn't like the most exciting topic, so hopefully don't bore you, and it's not your obviously favorite way to spend today, but hopefully we can all take something away from it. Here is the agenda. So just a quick look of where we're headed today. We'll kind of start with like pre-audit prep and what you can be doing right now, and then what it looks like when you receive that notification from HRSA and the data request list that they ask for, and then kind of walk you through what the audit day actually looks like and what happens when the audit is finished. Before we jump into the content, we'd love to learn a little bit about who's joining us today. So we're going to have some polls sprinkled in throughout the webinar. They will help us keep things a little more interactive, and this just helps us tailor the conversation based on like who's here. So let me put up the first poll, and this is hopefully on your screen. Have you personally gone through a HRSA audit before? So not necessarily your organization, but you personally, have you sat through one? Give that. Okay, this is very informative. So a lot of you have not been through a HRSA audit. So I hope that we can really give you guys some insight today. I really do. So with that, I'm going to turn things over. I don't know if I can share these. Should I publish these? Let's see, I forgot how these work. Okay. Can you see it? I don't know if you guys can see it. Hopefully, I did share results. So yeah, most voted no. It looks like 71% have not been through a HRSA audit. So you're not alone, folks. All right, we'll go ahead and hide that and go to Bailey. Take it away.
Okay, so like Lindsay said, we'll start by discussing some pre-audit preparation and things you can be doing long before you ever even receive a HRSA audit notification. So your covered entity should have ongoing procedures in place to review compliance and remain prepared for a HRSA audit. And as part of that, one of the simple things you can do is keep OPACE accurate and up to date. So you'll want to be regularly checking your OPACE records and making any necessary changes as soon as possible. Things in OPACE that you're going to be looking for. So double checking your contacts, making sure that your authorizing official and primary contact are still correct. Site eligibility, are all of your registered sites still eligible? Are there any new sites that will need to be registered, or any sites that will need to be terminated? You should confirm like accuracy of shipping addresses that you all have registered as a part of this too, making sure that those are all still correct and up to date. And then your contract pharmacies, so checking that to see if OPACE accurately reflects all of your active contract pharmacy arrangements. Are there any pharmacies that, again, should be registered or terminated? And then looking to see if OPACE matches exactly what you have in your actual contract pharmacy agreements, including like pharmacy address, exactly as it appears in your agreement. So it's good to review your actual contract pharmacy agreements and addendums periodically while completing your OPACE review, and just making sure you know where those live and how to find them, and making sure they are up to date. And then the final piece is checking your Medicaid status. So does OPACE accurately reflect your current Medicaid billing practices? If you do choose to carve in, are all of the applicable sites correctly identified on the Medicaid exclusion file? And again, any that need to be added or removed, just making sure you're keeping everything as up to date as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you, Bailey. Okay, next we're going to kind of jump into your policies and procedures. So those are obviously, I'm sure most of you know or have heard, like the foundation of your 340B program. Having them on paper is not enough though, and you really want your policy to clearly describe how your organization operates in its day-to-day practice, and you want it to match very closely to what you guys are doing. One of those areas to get very right is your patient definition, since HRSA gives such a blanket, just very vague gray patient definition. This is where we see a lot of risk because eligibility is not as simple as whether the patient was seen by one of your providers. Like, you need to clearly define how your organization determines that a patient is eligible, who's making that determination, and what data is being used, and then at what point in that workflow is that being decided. That becomes especially important when you're dealing with like referral prescriptions or specialty pharmacy. If you have providers with different arrangements or any types of prescriptions that might originate outside of a traditional encounter. I wouldn't just stick, the broad regulatory language in your policy. It needs to be language that is reflecting your operational flow with your team and your TPAs. And then the biggest question that we ask as a consulting group is, can you prove it? If you were to get audited and that client, like, can you prove that the patient was eligible and have supporting documentation? Because ultimately, they're not looking at what your policy says. They want to make sure that you're actually following what your policy says. So it all needs to line up. As far as the structure, so your policy needs to clearly outline who owns each major function. Now, it doesn't need to specifically say like this person manages this, but it can be a team or a department or a specific resource. And then the same goes for your systems. I highly recommend not saying a specific TPA or a specific EMR, because then when you want to update it, you have to update it every time that you guys change it, your EMR or TPA. Like, this kind of keeps it a little more general. That's an okay area for it to be general. And then you want to review your policies at least annually. And then anytime there's a major operational change or regulatory change, and strongly recommend having an outside 340B consulting resource review them annually with you. It's easy to read your policy and procedure from the lens of you work the program, but an outsider can kind of help see where that policy and your workflow aren't matching. And that's really key. That's what HRSA is going to look at. So with that, we'll go into kind of what the internal audit process is for your team.
Yeah, so internal audits is something we want to highlight because covered entities should be performing regular internal and independent audits. A HRSA auditor will want to see both. We've found that some entities might assume that if they have an outside company or consulting team performing audits for them, that this is sufficient. But in reality, they need an internal self audit process on top of that. So this kind of gets missed sometimes. So kind of want to spend some time on this. These audits should review contract pharmacy claims, entity-owned pharmacy, mixed-use claims, just depending on what is applicable to your covered entity. There's no set cadence or sample size necessarily that HRSA requires you use for your internal audits. They just want to see something, and they're going to want to see that it's detailed in your policy and procedure, exactly what you're doing and how often you're doing it, and that you can prove that you're actually following that. So a lot of entities will choose to do like 5 claims per pharmacy per month, or you might do 15 per quarter or something like that. Completely up to you, but just make sure it's spelled out in your policy. And then you're able to prove that you're actually doing that. So if you are selected for a HRSA audit, you will have to provide the documentation of these internal and independent audits. And then you'll need to be able to talk through your process and the audit scope. So being familiar with what that is in case of an audit as well. And then kind of highlighted here, just like what exactly you're looking for when you go to complete an internal audit. So on the contract pharmacy or entity-owned pharmacy side, you'll start by looking for an eligible encounter. You want to see that the patient had an encounter at an eligible site with an eligible provider within your defined time frame. So again, that's something that should be outlined in your policy and procedure, and you should audit based off of what you have in your P&Ps. There should be an encounter on or prior to the written date of the script as well. And then you're looking for an eligible provider so that the script came from an eligible provider of the covered entity, or if it's from an outside referral provider, you will need to make sure you have sufficient supporting documentation for that. Once again, relying on what is in your policy and procedure for a referral relationship. So definitely audit based on how you outline your eligibility requirements in your policies and procedures. Then you're going to look to make sure that the prescription or medication at least is mentioned somewhere in your EMR. And then you'll want to check payers. So looking for any Medicaid payers to ensure that there's no duplicate discount risks. And then on the mixed use side, it's just slightly different. You'll want to confirm that there is an order and administration documented in your EMR. You'll look at the location to confirm that the medication was administered from an eligible location. And then patient type, you'll confirm that the patient was listed as an outpatient status at the time of the administration. And then once again, another payer check to look for Medicaid payers and assess any duplicate discount risk. If you are carving in, you want to confirm that appropriate billing procedures were followed for that particular claim to prevent duplicate discounts. And then while you're doing these regular audits, it's also just a good time to review your TPA configurations to keep them up to date and adjust as needed to address any compliance gaps. So this could be things like updating your provider list within your TPA, Medicaid filters, location filters, and just any other qualification settings that your TPA might have. So it's best to review any failed claims that you've found and kind of trace those back to determine why exactly or how exactly they qualified within your TPA and what changes you can make to prevent that from happening in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, Bailey. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about diversion and duplicate discount monitoring. Now, this is an area we could probably have a whole session on. So this is pretty high level, but diversion and duplicate discount monitoring are both areas that need to be clearly reflected in your policy and procedure and how you handle them. So not just that you monitor for them, but what that actually looks like, how often it happens, and how those potential issues, when they arise, what you do with them. So when we talk about diversion, it's usually not something intentional. More often it happens because eligibility logic, usually in your TPA, is broader than you as the entity are realizing. So for example, this is one that we see all the time is a provider might be eligible at one registered location, but the prescriptions that they're prescribing at every location are being captured. We see that fairly often in contract pharmacy space, and the TPA just isn't looking and fully validating that it had a qualifying encounter. That's why just testing the claims back to an actual encounter date is super important. It gives you a chance to confirm that that logic is working the way that everyone believes that it is. And then for mixed use, I will say the biggest thing that we see is kind of the inpatient and outpatient activity isn't separated correctly, or patient status changes, reversals, returns, or inventory adjustments aren't flowing through your system as expected. So it's just a good idea to have a routine monitoring in place for that. As far as duplicate discounts, those can be a little bit more complicated, but obviously Medicaid billing requirements vary by state. So it's important just to understand, what your state or which states you bill Medicaid to, what they specify, and confirm the carve-in and carve-out elections are accurate within, all of your systems, billing, pharmacy, TPA systems. And then in the contract pharmacy environment, that might include validating, the Medicaid exclusion, reviewing claims that could have been billed to Medicaid, and then reconciling that dispensing data. The goal really is just have a process that gives you guys confidence that those risks can be identified early. And then when they come up, you know how to review it, document it, and then correct it appropriately. Okay, we have another poll because I know we're probably already boring you with all of the compliance and regulatory stuff. So this one is, let's see if I can put this one up. Let me go to my next slide. Hopefully it's on your screen. When was your last mock HRSA audit with an external group? I think these polls are my favorite part of the whole thing because I love, it's fun to see the whole, 340B world and where everybody's at. But we have lots of voters. Good job, guys. Thank you. This is very helpful. And it helps you too. Okay. Let's see. We've got, I think we're good. We'll go ahead and publish this. Hopefully, for some reason, when it's showing on my screen that it's published, but hopefully you guys can see it. Okay, so we have majority of you, I would say about half maybe, have had one within the last year. So that is good because that's what HRSA is going to expect. And then there's about 10% within the last 2 years and 25% never, and then 20% that don't have any idea, and that's okay. But just something, that's why we do this, because HRSA is going to ask for it. So I would say that's something to look into for sure for your organization. Okay, let me get that out of the way and we will move on. Okay, the HRSA audit notification letter. Let me go to the next slide. Now, this is really where your official audit begins. So in most cases, covered entities, you're going to receive 2 emails, usually on the same day. The first one's going to come directly from HRSA, and it's going to be kind of your formal notification, the scary notification that you've been selected for an audit. And that just gives a super high level overview of what they're going to be reviewing, including like your eligibility, OPACE records, contract pharmacies, all your 340 BIDs that they're going to look at. And then your second email is going to come from Bazell, which is the contractor that HRSA uses to coordinate and conduct the audit. So that email is a much more operational email, and it's going to identify who your auditor is, and then primary contacts for that. They will give you a proposed welcome call time, and then they'll give you your on-site audit dates and include any type of initial deadlines. So in that Bazell email, it also will include a couple different attachments that will have your data request list and then an information request form. And the information request form is what they use for the welcome call to, like, what contacts are going to be there, who are they, all of those types of logistics. And then the data request list is obviously the much bigger piece and outlines everything that the entity is going to have to provide to HRSA. So I think the biggest thing really when you get those is your initial thought is to freak out and be like, oh God, here we go. But slow down, read the emails carefully, and don't begin uploading anything. Just confirm, the dates that are in there and start reading through that data request list to see exactly what's in there. And that's the point where you're going to start notifying everyone who needs to be involved in the process. So that's going to be, any of your 340B internal team pharmacy, finance, IT, TPA, any other vendors that you think of, and then your 340B consulting team. So the earlier that every resource is engaged, that gives everybody more time to identify gaps and review the request and has a coordinated response. So the timeline really can move pretty quickly, and a lot of the requested items can take some time to gather, especially if you have to request things from particular TPAs or pharmacies, or even, government letters, things like that. So the initial communication really kind of sets the audit in motion. So from here, I'll hand it over to Bailey, and she'll kind of go over what the welcome call is and what to expect, because I feel like personally that is the one thing that catches all entities off guard, because you think it's going to be this really cute, just meet and greet and say hello, and that's not what it is. So let's go over that.
Yes, definitely. Can kind of throw you. So we want to prepare you for this piece of it too. So once you receive your audit notification letter, you'll get asked to set up a welcome call with your auditor. Typically in that email from the Bazell group, they will send a scheduling link for you to go in and set that up. The timeline between that initial notification, like audit notification, and when you actually have your welcome call can vary based on everyone's availability and your specific auditor. In the most recent audit we went through, just to give you an idea, there were about 3 weeks between that initial notification and then the welcome call. So during the welcome call, the auditor will use this time to just introduce themselves first. They'll review the timeline of the audit and any important dates and deadlines. They'll review the data request list with you, and then they will go on to ask you several questions about your covered entity and all your 340B program operations. So this is typically where people kind of get thrown off or caught off guard. A lot of times people are not expecting to be put on the spot with these types of questions on the welcome call. So they're either not prepared to answer or don't have the appropriate staffing included on the call to be able to answer the questions. So it's important ahead of time to review kind of your overall setup of your program and be able to speak to it during the welcome call. Lots of these questions will be asked again on the actual day of the audit, so feel kind of repetitive. Some of the questions will seem so simple that they almost feel like a trick question, and people kind of get in their head about that. To the other end of the spectrum, some of the questions are kind of more into the nitty-gritty details of certain specific policies and procedures and processes and all that. So the questions you get asked and the amount of time that will be spent on it, again, is going to just depend on your auditor and on certain aspects of how your program is run. They don't follow necessarily a set list of everything they have to ask. So we've seen anywhere from like 25 up to maybe 40 questions during this call. So kind of what to expect out of these questions. They kind of fall into a few categories. They'll ask just several general covered entity setup and like basics about your 340B program structure. They'll ask about any mixed use operations, contract pharmacy, and entity owned operations as well. Of course, these are all dependent on what like settings your entity actually utilizes for 340B. And then I kind of want to highlight some areas of questions that may be a little more difficult, or we've noticed people struggle with a little bit if you don't have the right people involved or haven't reviewed the right things beforehand. So they'll ask questions around like your procurement processes, and that'll be in all your settings, mixed use, contract pharmacy, and entity owned. They'll want to know about each one. They'll ask questions around inventory. So what inventory model do you use? Again, for mixed use, contract pharmacy, and entity owned pharmacy. Do you stock any consignment? Do you stock any meds at child sites or non-pharmacy locations? Things like that. And then the next section is kind of asking about your different vendors, systems, softwares. So they'll ask like which all wholesalers you use, which TPAs you use. They'll ask about any kind of pharmacy software, inventory tracking systems. And then another question on this section that I do want to point out, because I feel like it throws a lot of people off, is how many universes you will submit. The universe is how you will submit the actual like claims data for the audit. So you'll want to think through how this would kind of be divvied up for your particular organization. A lot of times people will do like a mixed use universe, a contract pharmacy, maybe an entity owned pharmacy universe if that applies. Or you may have, contract pharmacies in multiple different TPAs. So you may have a universe for each TPA. So think through what that would look like for your organization specifically. And then you can always ask, like during this portion of the call too, ask the auditor if there is a preference for how you split up certain things. Like if entity owned needs its own universe, or you can put it with contract pharmacy. We've seen both. So it's totally fine to kind of ask their preference during this part of the call as well. And then the last section on there is questions around accumulations, how you accumulate, how you track that. Do you accumulate based on administration or dispense, specifically in like a mixed use setting? That one can sometimes throw people too if they aren't totally sure. So other tips, just kind of in general for the welcome call, I would say answer only what is being asked of you without offering up too much additional information, which is easy to do if you kind of like nervous ramble, but try to just stick to the question. They can always ask you follow-up questions if they need more details. And then it is okay if you don't know an answer to just say you don't know, say you need to follow up on that, rather than trying to guess and giving them the wrong information. But overall, again, just want to stress the importance of making sure that you have all appropriate staff and any consultants included on your welcome call. We'd recommend setting up a meeting with the entire group prior to your welcome call, just to review all the main aspects of your 340B program and kind of make a plan for how you want to approach the call. And that way you're just as prepared as you possibly can be.
All right. See, and this is why we're doing this. Literally, the welcome call, they tell you none of this. You're just scheduling a little meet and greet, and it's not. So thank you, Bailey, for going over all of that. Oh, man. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the data request list, the daunting task that it is. So once that welcome call is complete, the data request list is going to be your focus. And when you first open it, it truly feels like a lot. And I mean, it is a lot. It's going to reach every part of your 340B program. And typically from the welcome call until those items are due is about 3 to 4 weeks. I will tell you, I have seen as little as 2 weeks. So preparation and just being ready for this beforehand, before you get that initial letter from them that you're being audited, is so important, because you don't know what your timeline is going to be. But high level, HRSA is asking you to demonstrate that you're eligible. And it typically is going to include your policy and procedures. You're going to go over CE eligibility documentation. You're going to have those 340B universes that Bailey was just talking about, provider lists, purchasing accounts, contract pharmacy agreements, and then unregistered 340B locations is kind of a newer one that's been added in the last year or so. And that's going to be any locations outside of your registered site. So like if you have, I'm trying to think of the most recent ones. Like if you have an in-house pharmacy, and obviously it's not registered, but that is where that would fall into that category. And then any Medicaid fee-for-service documentation, and that is Medicaid billing numbers, sample claims for those. It's really, the data request list is a huge long list. And it's really important to have a detailed checklist when you're doing this. And we recommend taking every item on the data request list and assigning it to a team or a resource, and then identifying, who's going to get that information, where is it going to come from, and tracking the status of each item so that you're submitting everything, because you will have that deadline. So typically, some requests might sit with your pharmacy, some will be in finance, some you need IT to run a report for you. Your contract pharmacies, they might need to run something for you. TPAs for sure are going to need to help you out. And then when those documents are uploaded to the NIH portal, that's the portal that they use, the folders in that are set up to reflect each section of the data request list. So what we recommend entities do is maintain that same folder structure internally at all times. So not just when you get this audit, like you already have these things ready. to go and already organized in the way that HRSA is going to ask for them. And that's something that we do as a consulting group, just help our customers, annually we go through just mock HRSA audits, and we structure it exactly like that data request list is, and we collect those and review the same types of documentations, and we have it structured in that same folder organization. And so that way, if that letter comes, you guys aren't scrambling or starting from scratch, because that just feels stressful for everybody. So that's really the goal, is gathering the large groups of documents by that deadline and having an organized, repeatable process and being able to show a clear and consistent story of how your 340B program operates. Okay, so with that, it's poll time, everybody's favorite time. So wake up. We have, do you feel confident in where all of your DRL items are located for your entity? Let's see. Give it just a second. I keep seeing it. Okay, here we go. All right, so okay, this is good. Oh, we still have votes coming in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and publish. Last call. All right, publish the results. Hopefully you guys can see it. We have 31% that are very confident that they know where everything is. That's good. I'm gonna assume those are people maybe that have already been through a HRSA audit. 50% that are somewhat confident, and that's probably true. There's some things on that DRL that are very hidden and can be very old documents too that you have to gather. And then 17% that have no idea. Also an okay answer, because again, this is, if you've never been audited, you don't even know what they're going to be asking you for. So that's why we're doing this. So thanks for participating in my polls. Okay, we're going to move on, Bailey, to just before the audit happens.
Okay, so up next, moving along in the process, typically 3 days before your actual audit day, you will receive the sample of claims that have been chosen for review during your audit. As soon as you receive these claims, there are a few things you'll want to start working on. So you should reach out to your credentialing staff to have them obtain employment contracts for any of the providers included on the sample. And then you'll want to reach out to your pharmacies to make sure they can obtain the hard copies of any selected scripts in the sample. And then the biggest part here is you'll want to do a deep dive into these sample claims and make sure that you know everything about each one. So I'm going to get into kind of what that looks like. So it's crucial that you spend kind of extensive time reviewing each of those claims in your days leading up to the audit. We recommend that the person who's going to be in charge of actually running the EMR during the audit go through and review each claim, practice walking through the process of auditing each claim and knowing where all you're going to need to navigate to, what you're going to need to show the auditor, and run through all of that so you're prepared. And then as you go through the sample, you should kind of take notes on each claim that you can reference during the audit to help guide you through the sample review portion. This significantly speeds up the sample review part of your audit day and makes it go so much smoother. So things to kind of look out for as you're reviewing those claims, things you'd want to note that will help you would be things like where maybe certain pieces are found in your EMR, especially if there is anything like unusual or kind of in a different place for a particular claim. Write that down. You'll want to note any high risk claims that maybe are a little less straightforward and make a plan for how you want to present those, what kind of documentation you're going to show, and how you'll defend it essentially. And then if you carve in, you'll want to be able to show the Medicaid billing and any appropriate modifiers that are attached for the Medicaid claims in the sample. So kind of another note on this, if the person running the EMR does not have access to all the billing information, you would want to also notify your billing department at this point to be able to pull that information for any particular claim. But either way, it is helpful to have a billing contact like available and kind of on standby if needed during the actual audit. So that's kind of something you should do at this point in the process as well. And then it's helpful to note any referrals so that you can be sure that you have supporting documentation and know where to find those. A lot of times that type of documentation is from outside providers. It may be located in a slightly different part of your EMR. So just knowing exactly where to go for that and being able to tell the auditor right off the bat that it's a referral claim. So the things you're looking for are going to be a little different. And then writing down like patient identifiers. So when you receive the sample, PHI will be removed. So it's helpful and speeds things up if you kind of jot down more identifying information on the claims. You may have MRN, but some people like to also have patient name, date of birth in front of them. Especially on your like contract pharmacy claims, you may only get RX number. And so then it's really important to make sure you can look up the script, pull out your MRN and patient name so that you can easily find those patients in your EMR during the actual sample review. So takeaway here, clear your schedule the week of your audit. Ensure you give yourself plenty of time to dig into this review process. And overall, the more prepared you are ahead of time, the easier and faster the sample review portion of the audit will go.
Yes. I have a question, Bailey. How many claims is HRSA gonna sample?
Question. I think we did on this last one, what was it, 65 contract / entity owned or entity owned pharmacy, and then mixed use.
Yeah. So they usually divide it. I would say you're going to have a total of between 65 and 70 that they're going to select. So I wasn't putting you on the spot. I wanted to make sure we point out how many that is. And it's going to take you some time to work through each of those and make sure you have everything. And if you don't do this ahead of time, I will tell you, we just went through an audit. This was done very well by the entity prior. And they cut their audit from pretty much 2 days to a 1-day audit. An entity that did not do this went from a 1-day to a 2-day audit. So that's the biggest takeaway. Make sure you review those claims extensively prior. So, okay, we'll go into just the typical audit day agenda, kind of what you can expect. Now, this can be rearranged based off of like what you guys have available, who's available when. They'll work with you on that, like who's available. But it's pretty structured, but depending on your size and the complexity of your program, like I just said, some audits can be completed in 1 day, others will take a couple days. And then they'll start, with an opening conference. That's going to be just your introductions. That's your polite meet and greet. Hello. To get the day started. And then the auditor will move into your pharmacy and site tours. So they will go to those places and they want to see how things work. How do you purchase drugs? Where do you receive them, store them? How are they dispensed and replenished? Where are you tracking all of this? And then the rest of the day truly is focused on your documentation and that sample review. That's the bulk of your audit, is truly digging into your EMR to look at all of these claims. Credentialing is one area that sometimes can catch people off guard. So the auditor will have someone from credentialing or your medical staff services walk through how your providers are employed or contracted, credentialed, and then how they maintain that. They will want the supporting, I think Bailey mentioned this already, the contract or the employment documentation for the providers that were in that sample. So let's say you had 40 total providers that were in the 65 claims that they sent. They want to see the contract of employment for all 40 of those providers. So you'll want to have those pulled during that 3-day prior. If credentialing has the heads up, they'll go ahead and get all of those pulled so they're ready. Just good things to know. We also recommend just having a virtual meeting line open. So if there's like TPAs or your consultants, maybe if they're not in town, or other team members that maybe can't be present but have to jump on quickly to answer some questions, have a meeting link for for those reasons as well. And then there's also just the closing conference, and the auditor will go through like any remaining outstanding items, because you'll typically have a couple days after the audit to get any outstanding things uploaded to that NIH portal. And then obviously they're not going to tell you anything about making any final determinations or any of that, because they're just going to write the report and send it to HRSA to make that determination. So just the biggest thing is stay organized, answer only what's being asked of you. Don't guess. And it's completely okay during that audit day to say, let me confirm and make sure I'm getting the correct information to you. Like that's okay, because the auditor will make a list of, we'll come back to this, and you'll come back to it at the end of the day. And then I'll just dig into the actual sample review. It's a little repetitive of kind of what Bailey just said of what you're going to look for. Like if you do this ahead of time, it's going to kind of follow that same flow of those selected transactions. So they will start with looking for the patient and qualifying encounter, seeing where that care occurred, that the patient met your eligibility methodology, and how the script administration ties back to the care provided by the entity. They'll validate obviously the provider relationship and location, and then they will follow that through to purchasing that process to confirm qualifying utilization was compliant. I don't want to miss anything. So if Medicaid was involved, they're going to review, your duplicate discount process. And that's, again, going to tie back to your policy and procedure. What do you guys do? What are you saying you do? And that's where they will bring in billing if necessary to show like proof of documentation and claims. So this is one of the most interactive parts of the audit. The staff is going to navigate that EMR, billing system, purchasing systems, your TPAs, and they're looking for one clear story that the qualifying encounter, happened all the way through to the 340B purchase. Okay. Response and resolution. So once we're done with our audit.
Yes. So you've survived audit day. What comes next? So Lindsay kind of mentioned, but at the close of the audit and then up to a few days after, you may be asked to submit additional documentation. So you'll want to be able to be on the lookout for that request, submit any additional requested documentation to that NIH portal as soon as possible. Then you kind of sit back and wait. So the time that it can take to get your results definitely varies. We have typically seen anywhere from 2 to 6 months from the audit day. You will receive your results, which may include areas for improvement and then also findings. So if HRSA identifies any findings, you will be required to submit a corrective action plan or a CAP. A CAP basically details your exact next steps, any policy updates, operational fixes, whatever it is that you're going to do to fix the findings and prevent them from occurring again in the future. So HRSA will review your corrective action plan and they have to approve it. They may ask for proof of implementation at that point as well. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But either way, HRSA must formally approve your CAP before the audit can officially be closed out. So this timeline can also vary significantly between audit day and when your audit is officially done and closed. There is some potential for back and forth with HRSA when it comes to that CAP approval. They could say, we're not approving this. You need to give us something else, fix something else. You have to resubmit it, wait for their approval, submit proof that you implemented it. So it can go back and forth a little bit, and that's when it really drags out. So with that in mind, we have seen it take anywhere from 6 months up to like 2 years to fully close. Hopefully things are more straightforward. Your CAP is approved the first time and it's closer to that 6-month mark than a full 2 years. But who knows? And then just after that post audit, it's important to use your HRSA audit findings and experience to strengthen your program compliance, tighten and update your policies and procedures, make any TPA adjustments. And then it's important to debrief and refresh staff education with things you've learned during the audit process.
Awesome. Okay, so here's our key takeaways. The biggest takeaway is that the audit readiness really has to be part of how your program operates all year. I can't stress that enough. You don't want to get that audit letter and then be like, oh shoot, we haven't been really doing much with our program all year. Make sure your policies match exactly what you're doing. Document the work that you are already doing, your monitoring audits, any findings that you have, corrective actions that you've taken into or put into place, and just keeping it organized so that it's all easy to pull when needed. And it's just important that everyone understands like who owns each area of your program and who to involve when something doesn't look right. And then finally, preparation makes such a difference. So annual HRSA style mock audits give you the chance to identify the gaps, organize your documentation, and just prepare your team before working through an actual audit deadline. So the goal is not perfection, just have a strong process to identifying the issues, correcting them, and show that your organization is actively managing your compliance. So that is the close. We have one more poll that I would love to send you. Let's see. So again, wake up. This one is 340B. Let's see, what is it? It's not showing. Oh, there we go. Which 340B audit and compliance topic would you like us to cover more in depth? So obviously, as you can see, this we could literally break this into so many different little 30-minute learning sessions on specific needs and what your entity is looking for, or education on those topics. So we would love to be able to do that. Thank you guys for voting, because this really helps us with our content and how we want to move forward. And obviously we want to keep giving valuable education to you guys and what we're learning and seeing. Awesome. Thank you guys very much. And then after this, I don't know if we had some question and answer. Bailey, do you see any? I'm going to let this poll run for just.
Yeah, we've got just one, which in the chat right now, you guys can also use this time. There's a Q&A box. If you do have any questions, we've got a little time we can try to answer you. So we'll give you a few minutes to finish the poll and pop your questions in, and we'll try to answer a couple.
Definitely, policy and procedure development is a strong winner, but we have, I mean, it looks like there's a few we can definitely take from this and give you guys some more education sessions and webinars. Policy and procedure development. This is not a sales call, but I strongly recommend working with a 340B consulting group to help develop that. It's just obviously Apexis, I'll use, they do have a template, but it's very wordy, and you want it to reflect your guys's actual practices. So, all right, we'll publish this, and then DRL preparation. So again, that's going to fall into those mock HRSA audits, having a group that will do your mock HRSA audit. I know for us, we also go through your policy and procedure and help with development on that. As a consulting group, I can't speak for others, but we do go into both of those and then help you be prepared for the DRL. Okay, let's see. Let's hop over to questions, see if anybody's got. Yes, the slides. I saw that was answered, Bailey. Slides this presentation will be sent out in an email with a link following the conclusion. Number one, general advice for CEs to strengthen their program's integrity. Honestly, I guess general advice would truly be ensuring you're doing the mock HRSA audits. Sometimes that gets overlooked, or, oh, it's not important because I feel like we have a good handle on things. But when you're audited by HRSA, they're going to ask you and expect that you have been audited in the last year. So I would definitely say that's the best way for you to uncover any gaps or areas that need to be improved, and handling it, in a way that is not coming from HRSA. So,
Well,
I don't know,
and the way to like be prepared and kind of practice for when that time actually comes. Because I feel like we've kind of driven that home in this presentation, but preparation really is key, as it is with most things. But I think the other thing that we've kind of mentioned a lot throughout this is policy and procedures. There's so many aspects of the program and of the audit process that they're going to look back at what's in your policies and procedures and rely on that. So having that super strong, and that's a really good way to protect you and keep you compliant too. So I think those are two of the big key points on that question. And then there's a question in here: what is the most common HRSA findings you see? Do you have any thoughts on that, Lindsay?
it too. So the most common and most simple is your OPACE record not being up to date. That is the most common one, and such an easy fix. Whether it's you didn't update your primary contact when that person left to go work somewhere else, or you didn't put your in-house pharmacy as a shipping address if it needs to be on there as a shipping address, or you didn't fully terminate a pharmacy that you did terminate, but it's not showing that way on OPACE. Just things like that, and obviously too, your carve in, carve out status, that a lot of times is not accurate. So just making sure your OPACE record is completely accurate. I don't know, Bailey, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, it's another thought on the carve in, carve out status, making sure that it's fully accurate. We've seen, a covered entity carves in and they have their, in-house NPI listed, but they also have an entity-owned pharmacy NPIs listed as carving in, even though they aren't really carving in practice. So making sure that you're aligned on what exactly you're doing and making sure that that's exactly as OPACE reads, because OPACE is kind of what they use as their source of truth there. So
yeah, for sure. Last question that I see in here: what is the usual frequency of a HRSA audit, or are they at random? So this is my professional opinion. They used to be literally clockwork every 3 years. Actually before COVID, they were every 3 years you could expect that, it's about time for that audit again. That has changed dramatically. I would say anywhere from the 3 to 5 year. And then also there are some that are, I won't say random, and they say they don't cherry pick, but if you make a lot of changes to your OPACE record, let's say you add a whole lot of child sites or a whole lot of contract pharmacies, or you just make a bunch of changes, that does send kind of a, not red flag, but flag up to them like, hey, we might want to check into this. And you can probably expect to see an audit sometime in the next 1 to 2 years if you make a bunch of changes. And that's just from my experience. Now, that doesn't mean don't make the changes that you need to for your program. It just means be prepared for that audit ahead of time. So, okay, I think that, I forgot to go through open floor. Here we are to finish out the slides. But thank you guys so much for attending. We have definitely some takeaways as far as where we can improve a little bit more on, or go more in depth on a couple areas. So, and if you have any other takeaway or feedback or advice for us, please, I love feedback, and I know Bailey does as well. So thank you guys very much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
thank you guys.
Thanks.